Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the EverymanBio podcast. I hope that you all had a great Thanksgiving break and are looking forward to spending the rest of the holidays in 2020 and getting through this wonderful year that we've had. um, this episode's a little bit different, kind of loosely related to biotech. It's very much connected to me and my journey and how I started EverymanBio, and that was largely with a significant psychedelic trip that sort of led to me to this realization that I needed to take my life into a new direction. And I've been wanting to speak to someone who has a sort of scientific or professional background in psychedelics. There's definitely a lot of us out there who've had personal experiences, but we're not actively studying it with scientific rigor, or we just our scope of experience is somewhat limited. And that's me, by the way. I don't have any professional training in psychedelics in particular. So, yeah, I went online and I'd sort of been thinking about some different things about what to do in the psychedelic space and the potential that it has for new mental health treatments. And I found someone in the Los Angeles area who has sort of started this nonprofit that is all pretty much geared towards training the next generation of people to administer psychedelic treatments, or to facilitate psychedelic experiences with people in a safe, controlled setting, which is really important for things like psilocybin and some of the other more strong psychedelics. So her name is Shiri, and Shiri is a coach for new psychedelic coaches, and she runs this nonprofit in Los Angeles. She's a big proponent of the potential for psychedelic treatment. And one thing that I thought was kind of interesting was that she said that, you'll hear this in the podcast, but she said that a lot of the people that come to her originally that were interested in exploring psychedelics, they were sort of in their mid to late 30s. They had already established careers and were just sort of at this pivotal point in their lives where they wanted to do something different because the things that they were doing weren't quite working. And that really resonated home with me. Um, you know, I had a very similar experience to this. I had worked really hard since I was 18 or 19 in establishing myself in tech, and had done a lot of really interesting things, but I was sort of, the more energy that I put into building my career, and specifically in this one lane, the other parts of me just sort of languished and they went unnourished. And after a while, that caught up with me. And I think that happens to a lot of people. I think a lot of people, they get this momentum in one direction in their lives, and there's often nothing preventing you from continuing it, to stop it, because you do get rewarded for that focus and that really hard work in that one area. But we're not one-dimensional people. We're multi-dimensional people. We have many different facets to our personalities, and we have lots of different needs, and we can't just all be software engineers all day, every day, forever. Or there's probably some that can do that, but I think most of us need to stretch our legs and to feed other parts of ourselves in many different ways. And for someone who's really stubborn like me, I think one of the things that psychedelics, right, I can really speak from personal experience here, but one of the things that having a significant psychedelic trip sort of forced me to do was to sort of break down the barriers that were preventing me from changing. They took away the protection mechanisms that I had built, the suit of armor that I'd been carrying every day, that is what I used to motivate myself to invest everything I had into my career. And when I was able to sort of shed all of that away, I realized, wait a minute, the source of my deep, unsettled unhappiness, a lot of that is coming from the fact that I have other parts of myself that I've not been giving a care and attention to. And that is, for me, was the part that was connected to life, to nature, to understanding the origins of anything that's living, and being connected to those things. And I think, talking a lot about tech and software engineering, because that's my field of reference. But I think when you work such a long time in technology, you work with so many abstract ideas. You work with code, and code is, anyone. I always like to tell people, like, anyone, you could train a monkey to type keys on a keyboard. The hard part is thinking and knowing what to type and putting it in the right order. And so, in tech and in finance and some of these professions that pay really well, that require a lot of hard work and a lot of studying and a lot of practice, you're really you're getting paid to think. You're getting paid for your ideas. But there is something, for me, very healthy and very much desiring to just stick my hands into the soil and to till it and to smell it and to be in touch with the fundamentals of what it means to be alive, to my fellow humans, to plants, to animals, to fungi. And so a lot of that, that's the psychedelic experience is what facilitated that for me, and it was incredibly helpful. And so I think that it offers a huge potential for the world, for treatment, and I don't think that it's a cure. I'll tell people that right now. There's no such thing as a free lunch in life and in nature, and you're not going to ever, probably not in our lifetime, ever be able to take a pill or have one singular thing change your personality, change your entire life, which is a sort of emergent property that comes from the careful, delicate dance of all these systems in concert with one another. But what the psychedelics can do is it can sort of yank you out of your frame, out of your perspective, and impose a new experience that you can then build upon, a new experience that you otherwise didn't have access to, that allowed you to shed this natural suit of armor that we all carry with us day in and day out, shed that so that we can go and explore other parts of our lives and other parts of ourselves. And it allows you to do that by sort of breaking away the fear that prevents us from doing that. For me, it's a daily battle. EverymanBio is still very young. I've walked away, and I continue to walk away from a very lucrative career. When I say lucrative, I'm not meaning millions. I think for most people, a six-figure job is a great job. And I think for anyone in tech who's done it a long time, who has managerial and executive experience, the six figures can get pretty high. And I walked away from all of that. And even the thought of going back to it sometimes makes me sick because I think about the way some of the experiences I had back in the day with the startups. There's such a grind, and I didn't do it the right way when I was younger. I gave up such a large part of myself thinking that that's what it took in order to be successful. And so it's a little scary to walk away from all of that, to create something new, to put yourself out there. I've never podcasted before. This is, I'm still learning how to freeform talk like I am right now. I don't know how to do it. And, how many of you are going to say, God, this guy is really hard to listen to? Probably a lot. And you turn it off and you go somewhere else. In the beginning, maybe no one's listening to it. Some of you are, thankfully, and I'm super glad. Those of you, by the way, have been supportive and send me nice comments and messages. It really does mean a lot to me, because every little bit of support just carries me to the next moment. And sometimes it's all I need. And sometimes I need that. Sometimes I don't have it, and that's really difficult. So it's a little scary to be doing something new where it's uncertain, the end destination. I don't know. All I know is I want to learn about genetic engineering. I want to learn about biotechnology. I want to talk to really interesting people and do this podcast. And I just have to trust that something amazing is going to come out of that. And whether or not that translates into a career or money or whatever, I don't know. But what I am getting out of it is this satisfaction and this connection to nature and to people that I never had before. And I don't know that you can put a dollar figure on that, because it's sort of bringing me a little bit of sanity and peace in my life, and that's worth quite a bit for me. So yes, I'm going to occasionally have people on the show, on the podcast, to talk about psychedelics because it's related to our well-being. Our well-being is very much grounded in the biology and the neurochemistry in our brains. And if that's not biology, well, I don't know what is. That's definitely biology. And there's a lot of intersection between the science and the development of the drug to fungi. So it's all connected to me. And so Shiri is really cool. I'm really glad that she didn't know who I was. She let me just cold email her and said, yeah, I'll do the podcast. We did it. I think it was really cool. I'm really glad that she was open and was able to connect with me. And we were able to have a frank discussion about psychedelics and who should take them, and not just mushrooms, by the way. I think my frame of reference is mushrooms because that's what my experience has been. But actually, if you look at the FDA, they've approved a lot of medicine, new drugs, or not new, but a lot of psychedelics like mescaline, MDMA. Each of these psychedelics are sort of a class. Psychedelics is a class of drugs, but there are different effects, and different effects, the drugs, the different psychedelic experiences that you have, you can use those minor differences or those subtle differences to treat different forms of mental health issues. Ayahuasca, for example, has shown to be really helpful with drug addiction, and MDMA with treating PTSD in veterans. So there are some differences in how these drugs work in the brain that lend themselves towards different kinds of treatments. And so I think that's really cool. And so just thank Shiri for being on the podcast. And I think we're going to probably see a lot more of these psychedelic centers pop up as psychedelics continue to rise in popularity. We had a couple of states legalize them this election. And my general sense, my gut sense as well, is that there's something in the ether, there's something in the collective consciousness of society that is one, desperately seeking new options to treat mental health. I think we're woefully lacking something. And I think there's a growing acceptance of, hey, maybe let's not let our fear of the unknown steer us away from what could be a potentially great new drug. And I think a big part of that was the marijuana legislation and journey that the country's been on in the last 10 years. I think there were a lot of people who were like, no, I'm never going to try, let's just call it THC as a drug, because of that's sort of what's been indoctrinated in them for their entire lives. And when it became legal, you got a lot of people that experienced it and were like, wait, this is it? This is the thing that I was told was so horrible and bad? And so you can't help but let that philosophically break some new ground in your mind, because you begin to wonder, like, if I had these strong opinions about THC, what other strong opinions am I holding about other drugs that I haven't had experiences with? Maybe we should begin to be open to them and study them more closely. And like with all things, I think you need there's no cures. I think you need balance in everything. Set and setting is really, really important. Mindset. People don't know it's set and setting. What's the difference? Set, mindset, setting. Make sure you're in a good frame of mind. You're in a safe place. Preferably you have someone there who's sober that can kind of ground you when you're going through something difficult. And so it's an exciting time, and something that I'm really curious about. And as I begin to sort of explore the market opportunities that are coming in psychedelics, I plan to talk to more people who are on the cutting edge of using psychedelics to really help people. In my mind, that's a win-win. I would love to find a way to evangelize and bring to market and make this new class of drugs more accessible to people, but to do it in a responsible way that where science can study it and a trained professional can either administer it and or guide it, because I think that's where we're going to have the best chance of it actually being useful and not necessarily just recreationally. Anywho, so this is new. This is the first time I probably rambled on for a good 15 minutes. So if you're still hanging in there, that's awesome. I think what we're going to do is go right into the podcast. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome Shiri to the podcast. I think you're going to really like this. Make sure you connect with her and show her some love if you like what she has to say. And if you are in LA and you are interested in learning how to facilitate psychedelic experiences for yourself and for other people, I think you're going to like this one. You should probably reach out to Shiri at the, she's got her contact information at the end of the show. I'll put it in the show notes as well. Okay, I'll stop rattling. Without further ado, Shiri. Why don't we just start with you introducing yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I am a psychedelic integration professional. I've been a pioneer in the psychedelic integration field since 2015-ish, about. I have an integration coaching practice, as well as I am the CEO, Chief Ecstasy Officer, and founder of Psychedelic School, which is an online educational platform that I founded along with my partner, Dr. Ben Malcolm, where we offer education, and specifically on the topics of integration and pharmacology and professional training for people who want to get involved in the psychedelic renaissance.
That's fantastic. How did you get started with psychedelics? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about your first experience with getting into this field.
Sure. Well, my first experience was many years ago, but I'd like to talk about the one that actually made me shift my focus and has opened up my understanding and my ability to see psychedelics as healers of the soul, and their ability to heal our psyche and bring a lot more ease and joy into our human experience. So that experience for me was in 2014. It was a very large MDMA dose, which to this day I'm not entirely sure what the exact dose was, but I'm guessing that it was between 200 to 300 milligrams. What happened then was that it was completely unexpected in terms of its magnitude. It was recreational in terms of it was taken at a music festival, and had no skills, no skill set, no preparation, just completely spontaneous and very exciting nonetheless. But the next day I was just left with a seemingly an emptiness in my heart that I've never seen before, but also a void that was filled with a lot of gratitude that I've also never experienced before. So I remember driving home and just crying all the way home and just understanding that I went through something really massive, but of course it was just ineffable and I did not have the words to explain it or even articulate where I was, but it felt like something just passed over me that I couldn't ignore. And that was basically the trigger to what I call my psychedelic spiritual emergence that happened just a few months later, and from there just completely went running. So
yeah, that's fantastic. So it wasn't planned, it just sort of emerged from this one experience.
Yeah, nothing was planned. It was literally a baggie of some sort that just got poured into a bottle accidentally, and it was one of the most incredible nights. But yeah, I think I just want to emphasize that it was almost like a crack to my psyche. Like someone just took a little hammer and tapped on my psyche and it just started cracking, and then it completely broke open about 6 months later.
And yeah. So that's really interesting. I also had a significant experience with psilocybin mushrooms. I wouldn't say it was taken recreationally, but I didn't have like you as a resource, as example, because I think we'll talk about this, you facilitate experiences in a controlled setting with trained professionals and even trained people, I believe, as well, which I want to learn more about. But one of the things that came to my mind when you just shared that experience is that some people don't go down this pathway that you went into, which is you had some degree of introspection and looking at that experience and figuring out a way to apply it to where you wanted to take your life after that experience. MDMA is definitely commonly traditionally a party drug that people use recreationally. Obviously, not everybody has that sort of experience that you had, where you kind of went into this healing, a totally different space with it. What do you think is the differentiation between what led to you to have this different experience that maybe sent you on this path of healing versus maybe other people who use it recreationally and use it differently?
Yeah, great question. So I think I just want to reiterate that there wasn't anything intentional about it in terms of like the path that it took. I think it just kind of introduced itself to me and did not leave me with much choice. So basically what happened again after that crack on MDMA was that the next few months I became very more aware of just what psychedelics coming onto the media and reading more, like being more aware of articles coming out about it, and then just noticing more synchronicities. So I was more aware to that, and then it led me into a traumatic event in a relationship that I was in at the time. And I kind of reached rock bottom in terms of my mental health and where I was in my life at the time. And there wasn't much wiggling room in coming out of the depression that I was in. It was like, okay, you're all in right now. You better find a way to take care of yourself. And the only way that I could do that was at the time what I knew how to do. And the skill that I learned was meditation. So I started meditating heavily to find some peace and ease through this really hard time in my life. And through the meditation is where I experienced that psychedelic emergence vision, which I had when I was actually completely sober with no psychedelics involved at all. And so to answer your question, I can say that I knew where I was going, but as soon as that happened, I just started following all the breadcrumbs that, again, synchronicities that life offered to me, and there was no getting away from it. I just felt like it grabbed me by the neck and just pulled me along, and I had to go along with it. But it was the most beautiful surrender ever, right? So.
That is a beautiful story, and that is something that is part of the power, I think, of psychedelics, is that and I'll just speak from personal experience.
Yeah.
Over time, there's a natural tendency to want to have so much control over life, because the control sort of puts off at bay the anxiety and fears that come from not having control. And there's something about psychedelics which breaks through that and sort of forces you to confront aspects of your psyche and your life that otherwise you've built up all these defense mechanisms to put off. And it's a very powerful thing, but that's also, I think, what creates a lot of fear in people about psychedelics. And also, I often say this in the podcast when we talk about psychedelic experiences, that I feel like we don't really have the language to talk about these experiences, because the experience sort of transcends language. So everybody is trying to use their own language to describe it, when we really just don't have the words to put to the power and the meaning behind the underlying experiences. What would you say to people that are listening and are curious but fearful about having that first psychedelic experience? Like, what would you say to them about the way they should think about it, the way they should look at it, and what resources are available to ensure that they have the best possible experience, or if they're thinking about trying it? What advice would you have to give to them?
Great question. So first, just a little reminder that many of us had wonderful, amazing experiences with absolutely zero knowledge or preparation when approaching our first trip ever, myself included, without any knowledge on the topic. Again, not even knowing the differences between setting doses. I think again, same thing. Someone passed me a bottle with water and some acid sludge in it, right? LSD sludge. And I went on a 24-hour journey, and it was the most incredible thing. Very beautiful. So that is definitely an option. That said, those of us who do want to give more care to the matter and want to approach it with a higher level of agency and responsibility, the first thing that I would consider is, first of all, what your goals are when approaching this kind of modality. So would you have the goal of transcendence, of meeting a mystical experience, of seeing what that transpersonal space is like, and just approaching it with a higher level of curiosity, of just learning something new and exploring that realm? Or perhaps you're dealing with acute mental health conditions, life stressors, relationship issues. You want to resolve your depression and anxiety. Perhaps you're aware that you've undergone acute trauma in your life. And so I think that's the first step, is just differentiating between the two and understanding where you're at in your life and what your motives are. And then that will lead you down to the next step of, okay, like what will be the appropriate or most supportive substances that can help facilitate that experience, because different substances just have different personalities, different, it's like putting on different lens, right, to look at different aspects of your psyche. So for example, MDMA is an empathogen. It really does color the world with more of the ecstasy and joy and the love and a lot of forgiveness, and has a very soft quality to it. Ayahuasca, for example, is maybe not the greatest psychedelic for everyone to start off with, because it can be very taxing physically, emotionally. You need a higher level, I feel, of resilience to approach that medicine. You do need more acute preparation work with that, especially if you're coming in to resolve addictions or traumas. And of course, there's the whole diet thing beforehand that we need to observe. So different medicines require different approaches. So understanding what your motives are will help you understand how to approach the different substances, and then it'll just be a lot easier. So that's my recommendation.
That's very interesting. I don't think there's a lot of people like you right now. I do think that's probably going to change, but I don't think most people in America have access to a guide to help them with this, having an experience, and even getting that information. For me, that's kind of cool. I'm not very familiar with the matching between the drug and the type of experience you might need based on where you're at in life. So that's, to have someone to guide you through that, I think is incredibly powerful. Could you talk a little bit about your practice? Is it only on the training side, or do you actually help facilitate having these experiences with people that are new to psychedelics?
Yeah. I do not facilitate any psychedelic journeys. As we know, currently in the United States, this practice is still under legal scrutiny. So I wish it were easier, but I do not partake in that type of activity. Nonetheless, there are many people, right? Research shows that millions and millions of people are still partaking in these substances. And that's why I do the work that I do, just recognizing that as a harm reduction strategy, just looking at a very large and underserved demographic and seeing what their special needs are and catering to those needs. And that stems again from my own, being a part of that demographic and seeing what I needed at the time, and what was missing for me. And I saw that a lot of things were missing, so I created it. So I don't facilitate. My practice did begin with being a coach. So I did study psychology, but I'm not clinically licensed, so I cannot call myself a psychotherapist. But I call myself a coach. That's just a professional term that is used. And I do have a coaching practice where I assist people through a program that I created called the Psych Soul Method. And it has different levels to it, but it's a minimum of 3 months of an integration journey, which includes both the assessments and consultation and basically seeing where the person is at in their lives and why they want to approach it, help them get clear on what their needs are, and also helping them match, as you say, matching the substance. And I have a specific process for that. It's called psychedelic road mapping, as part of the Psych Soul Method, where we unpack the person's lives and intentions and then help them build a roadmap to what their psychedelic healing path could look like over the next few months, including what needs to be focused on in their preparation, including unpacking their different levels of the psyche, because oftentimes people approach this modality for specific reasons. And then when you sit down with them and you start asking them the right, like very direct and clarifying questions, then a different story emerges. So the spotlight actually might shift and their path might completely change. So basically the whole idea is to help them gain awareness through a very specific container at a specific time in their lives where they know that they're dedicated to this type of work, and that sends a very strong message to the psyche that, okay, this person is here to do serious work, and the dialogue begins to emerge on a much more deeper level. So I do focus on providing that type of therapy, integration therapy, to clients. More specifically, I'm now actually on the side of training other people to do what I do through my modality. And that was a step in my career that I took when I didn't have the time to appropriately support the clients that were coming to get my support. So basically I had to replicate myself. So I thought, okay, how can I replicate myself so all these people can get the support that they need? And people were asking me if they train, if I train people the people wanted to learn from me and wanted me to mentor them. So I just naturally and organically opened a training program, and it grew from 8 months now to a year, and actually it's turning into an 18-month program as we speak.
Wow.
And just multiplied in the rate of the expansion of the groups as well, and it's pretty amazing. I'm really proud of it. So I currently am more focused on training professionals that want to do what I do and be an integration support professional.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have this growing sense that the collective consciousness of society is growing more open to the possibility of psychedelics and their role in healing and treatment. Are you finding that as well in your own practice, that you're seeing more people come to you who are interested in this field, and that's why they're reaching out to you? Because there's a sort of sense in the public ether that there's momentum building around this area.
There's momentum building, and we're all building it together, right? Because why are they coming into the spotlight? Because of people like us that have all undergone massive, beautiful healing through these compounds. And, if you're like me, and a lot of people are, they have these beautiful experiences, and they feel like they've really been able to get a hold of their life and heal. And then the next thing they want to do is they want everyone to heal too, because it's so amazing. So, that's how I started, right? I was like, wow, this is just amazing. Everyone needs to have this. This is just a fire that a lot of us as beginners start cultivating, and we're not really sure where to put that fire and that passion to good use, right? And that's something that we're building right now in the psychedelic renaissance, is again, identifying what the demographics needs are and creating these spaces. So we're creating spaces for people who want to contribute in that way. And again, a lot of us want to contribute because we've been through that ourselves. And basically it's like throwing a match in a field, right? And it's just one by one. We just, keep pulling more people in, and that's what creates the momentum. So I think it kind of like, it's like a two-way street, right? It's like there's a fire in the match, but we're all a part of this fire. It's not isolated experiences. It's not necessarily people that haven't experienced it themselves. It's, again, it's that just, I feel like that's how consciousness is spreading. That's how it's expanding. And it really is contagious in that way. That's how it's multiplying.
Absolutely. I think there's also just a yearning for it as well. A
So
yearning for,
much.
yeah, absolutely. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what does your clientele, what does the typical person look like? Because I know you've shifted now over to the teaching side, but before that, when you were coaching people that were interested in having an experience, but making sure that they were going into it with the right knowledge and someone who could help coach them through how to make sure that they got the most out of it based on what their individual needs were. What was sort of the breakdown of people that came to you? What was it? People that had addiction problems? Were there just psychonauts, people that were not necessarily trying to solve any particular problem, but wanted to do the exploration of consciousness? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And in the same on the teaching side, what sorts of people are now coming to you that are saying like, hey, I want to learn more about psychedelics and how to facilitate these experiences in the right way?
Yeah. Amazing question. Thank you so much for asking, because I've definitely noticed a shift in the types of clients that used to come to me and the ones that come to me now for the training, right? So the archetypal client that I've had for a few years when I was doing the private practice were, and still is, people that are 35 and older. So typically it's people that have reached kind of like the midpoint in their lives. You know, they've done everything right. They went to school, they got the job, they got the house, are successful, they have the family, they have the children, and still something is not working out. So they played by the rules and they're finding themselves either horribly depressed, typically under some type of medication. That's usually a part of the equation. Not feeling fulfilled with the life that they've built. Yeah, I do get some people that are addicted, but I studied this realm, but I don't specialize in it. And I also don't advertise it on my website. So I get less of that. So, you know, a lot of the people that come also depend on how you market yourself, right? And the message that you have. So my message is definitely, it doesn't call to people that are suffering from hard addictions, but I know that other people that are addiction coaches definitely get that. So that demographic definitely exists. But for me, it was more of high functioning people that basically underwent a complex early development childhood trauma. So everything is going right in their lives. They haven't necessarily had like a bad experience or like a negative experience growing up, but something is still missing. And yeah, and then when we start unpacking it, then it all typically leads to early childhood development, family dynamics, unpacked trauma, repressed trauma, and attachment theory, and that's everything builds on top of that. So that's the typical client. And I also just want to say that I don't think it's a coincidence that it's at that stage of life, because as Carl Jung himself said, you know, he said we spend the first half of our lives going outward, building ourselves, building the foundation for our lives, playing by society's rules. And then we get to the halfway point and we start internalizing that energy, directing that energy inward to get all the answers that we haven't found yet. So again, it's 35 to 45 is that bracket. And that's when people are really ready to really take control of their lives and really to take responsibility for everything that's happened to them and to create the life of their dreams.
Yeah, it's so funny because you basically described me.
Yeah.
I'm definitely in that demographic, experienced trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and spent, did the whole career thing and was moderately successful. And then definitely was confronted with like, this is it. I'm not as happy. I'm not as happy as I thought I would be, attaining all these things that I thought were going to be the things that made me happy. And for me, what was missing underneath that was connection to other people and to nature. My background being in tech, It's very easy to go long periods of time disconnected from real things, from real people, from nature, from things that I would say matter, life. When you're working with bits and numbers and just technology, it's so far removed often at times from realness. And so if you go deprived too long of that, it will catch up with you for sure.
Absolutely.
So these people, when they reach these sort of milestones in their lives, have they had an experience with psychedelics? So like, what do you think leads them to think like, oh, this is an avenue I could try that will open my eyes to a new experience? Like, why wouldn't someone just, and this is just hypothetical, psychedelics was definitely not the first thing that I went to. I mean, I've tried the antidepressant route. I've done the therapy for 10 years, which I love, by the way. I still do it every week. What leads people to the psychedelics approach as a tool to try?
Typically, it's people who have tried everything. They've done the therapy. They've done everything again. Everything that they were told. They took the medications. They're well functioning, but they still haven't been able to crack the code of their soul. So it's it's people that have either that, and also as for your question of how experienced are they, many of them actually have had experiences back in the day in college. A long time ago, I've had 2-3 experiences, so they're not but they're also not completely new. So I feel like that type of client demographic I feel is actually more popular. And yeah, there are some that are, they're just like making their way in, and they're making their way in because of Michael Pollan. And Michael Pollan honestly did this movement. Some people, I mean, different opinions, of course, but let's just say that he definitely helped raise the awareness of the collective as to the power of these substances. And many, many clients find me on Google because they read Michael Pollan's book.
Yeah, he did a great podcast on Joe Rogan as well, which I really enjoyed. And let's talk about like the demographics of the people that want to get your coaching to learn how to be a teacher and facilitate these experiences. What sort of backgrounds do they come from?
I do find that it varies, and I'm also seeing a difference with every group so far that I've taught. Currently, it seems like the people that are drawn to the program are more experienced with medicine. Typically, they're marginalized communities, either people of color or LGBTQ, which is really interesting. Less therapists, but yeah, people who have, again, experienced it for themselves, and they want to serve. And those are really some of the parameters that I look for is how much do you want to be of service? Are you really looking just for a program for yourself for self-development, or do you understand that basically by being certified through this program, you're actually going to make or can make a much greater impact in this massive psychedelic renaissance? And I choose to work with people who have that awareness and understanding and want to help facilitate this, usher in this new era of consciousness.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's awesome. It speaks to the power of the medicine, and that so many people have the experience and want to go out and help other people have that experience. Obviously, there's an aspect of this that is still heavily regulated, and I think that's changing. And we saw that in this election, Oregon has legalized psilocybin mushrooms, which is great. I think Colorado has already decriminalized it, and I think DC as well also passed to decriminalize psilocybin.
And Oakland decriminalized as well. And just today, actually, on the news, they had an article that in New Jersey they're amending the marijuana legalization bill to include other psychedelics as well. So
that's great. Yeah. It seems to me to be moving much quicker than the medical marijuana, like how long that's taken, maybe decades to finally get to where I think we have 40 states now that have decriminalized it, and more and more every year that are legalizing it. Where do you think we're at in 5 or 10 years with psychedelics? Is Yeah, is it there's clinical trials. I like to follow the clinical trials as well.
Yeah.
Many of these psychedelics have been issued as breakthrough therapies by the FDA, such as MDMA, psilocybin. I don't know that ayahuasca has, but I know mescaline has some of the cactus-based drugs
I
as
did not
well.
know that. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a new startup, actually one of the first US-based psychedelic drug production companies called Journey Collab. So we're checking them out, and they're working on a very similar project that I'm working on, which is engineering yeast. I'm working on a project to engineer yeast to produce baeocystin, which is a precursor to psilocybin. Not as closely studied, but believed to be a more gentle psychedelic. But they're working on engineering yeast to biosynthesize mescaline,
Wow, I did not
a
know that.
synthetic version of it, which is really cool. So there actually are, all of these psychedelics are very similar chemically to serotonin. They actually operate on the serotonin receptors in the brain. So I think what's probably happening is there's a lot of exploration around analog drugs that are very similar to the classic psychedelics. So there's probably a whole bunch of other compounds that have similar effects, and because the government doesn't know about them yet, they're not regulated, and it opens the way for a lot more research. But where do you think, going back to my question, where do you think we're at in 5 years with regards to psychedelics in terms of the availability of the drug all the way to treatment and everything in between?
Wow. Yeah, you're talking about 5 or 10 years from now, and I'm just thinking of everything is happening so fast right now that it's almost hard to conceive where we'll be then. So one step at a time, right? So I do know, as you will probably know as well, that with these clinical trials that are going on, MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is due to become a legal a therapeutic modality in as early as 2022. So that's in less than a year and a half, which is just around the corner. And I do believe, that all this is happening faster than the cannabis, because cannabis was the one that opened the door. And, as they say, it's the gateway drug. It totally is the gateway drug in many ways. And thank God for this beautiful master plan that, has opened these gates and is making these potent substances make their way into the heart of America, right? Now, a lot of people would have different opinions about that. So really, we can really break it down into the different ways that psychedelics are currently offered. So we have obviously the recreational use, which is, some people like to say recreational, right? Because we get to recreate ourselves. So recreational. There is the ritual and religious, right? Which we have a few churches operating under the Religious Freedom Act, as well as we have the medical model, and what am I missing? Medical, and then there is also the decriminalization movement, which is a completely different animal. So each one of these streams have, I don't know if you would call them different demographics, but they kind of have their own agendas as well. And I guess they're all operating also simultaneously and side by side, which I think is actually a good step in the right direction. A lot of people are criticizing the medical model because, they might think that actually it's really shifting the current power dynamic. They're not really making it available for the people, of just shifting the power from one group to another one, which can be true. But at the same time, a lot of people that would never go to the would never try psychedelics without actual medical support, now they will have an opportunity to try it, right? And then of course with the decriminalized, we have the whole idea of cognitive liberty, which I really subscribe to. And I think the biggest challenge that we're going to have in the next few years, and this going back to your question, is I think that society is open and ready to receive these medicines, but do we have the right infrastructure in place to support this interest? So right now, therapists are just being trained. We don't have enough clinics yet. It's projected that when MDMA becomes legal in terms of therapy, which again, it's a year and a half, is not that long, there's going to be such a high demand and so few trained therapists And of course, the time that it takes and the insurance and billing and the hours that, doctors and therapists bill, which, it's a highly respected profession, a lot of education and money is behind it. $12,000 to $18,000 for 3 treatments of MDMA assisted psychotherapy. That's the projected cost that that I heard. So, there was that challenge, and then who gets to decide who trains all these people? So if they don't want to go to a therapist, are they still allowed to use it, if they have the support of a community or of a coach or of an integration circle of something? Like, if they take an online course, is it going to be like getting a license, when you're 16 years old, go pass this test and then you can have a license to go investigate your psyche? Like, what is it going to look like? So I think these are all great questions, which I think right now a lot of us are trying to figure out right now and prepare for that, doing the best that we can, trying to envision what it could look like, and providing and testing out solutions right now as we speak to see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You touched on many things that have come up in my conversations. There's an apprehension of, I don't want these drugs to be commercialized, and for the pharmaceutical companies, you hear the same thing with the cannabis industry as well. And there's obviously trade-offs associated with those, but there's also something to be said about having some regulations and some rigor and science and medical support behind studying these drugs and understanding how they work and facilitating positive therapeutic experiences. I think with anything that's as powerful as psychedelics, there's an inherent risk associated with using them. And I think for a variety of different reasons, I just think that it's incredibly powerful. And I think and I'm just giving my personal experience, I would not advise most people to go about it uneducated at the very least, or uninformed about, or even without intention. Although there's an argument, you and I both had experiences without intention going into it. So there's certainly an argument. I guess the point that I am trying to make is that it's not black and white. I think that there's a path forward that probably integrates some aspects of of everyone's opinions into these. And so very, very interesting. A lot of people that I find in the mushroom growing community, because that's kind of how I got started, and a lot of people that that listen to the podcast and are following me on social media are interested in mycology. Psilocybin mushrooms are a big part of that. That's often what gets people interested into the world of fungi and studying it. A lot of those people are young people, 13, 14, 15 years old. They figure out they can grow mushrooms and they do it underneath their bed in their bedroom.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And it's really cool, because for a lot of these kids, I call them kids, sorry guys, for a lot of these young folks, they get really into it. And a lot of people in the mushroom growing community will say the very act of cultivating mushrooms is therapeutic in and of itself. Because it's not as easy as planting a seed and watering it and watching it grow. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But the work of tending to your harvest, to your crop, is in and of itself a regulatory thing that you do, and it can be helpful to the psyche. So I wonder if you just have any general advice or thoughts that you would give to the young people whose brains aren't fully formed yet, who have a lot of life to live, that are venturing into the field of psychedelics, this very powerful, potentially life-changing drug that can alter your consciousness. Is there a message, or are there words of wisdom that you could pass on to young people that might help guide them as they explore this clandestine world of psychedelics?
Yes. My message to the young people is always take less than you think you need to take. It's always easier to add more if you think if you feel like you need more. Then once you take a little bit more than you should, then you just have to write it out, and that could be a potential opening for really challenging experiences. And I'm saying that not to deter anyone, but because of lack of resources that currently are available. They don't talk about this in high school. They don't talk about, I mean, they just, talk about this, just say no. I think they're still doing that, which means that they're not providing you with really valuable information that could really make or break your, not just your experience, but also your psychological state. So without getting into too much detail, the rule of thumb is always take less. If you think that you want to do this, you're feeling called to do it, you want to do it with your friends, with your buddies, whatever you want to do, just take less. If you just, that's the advice I have.
Less is more, for sure. You can always add more.
You can always add more, exactly. And of course, there are many more like little bits of advice. You can test your drugs, do it in a safe, contained place. If you're going to do it in a safe setting. Don't take them when you're angry at your girlfriend or boyfriend. Just do it in an at-home environment where you feel safe. And so, yeah, you can always minimize reckless behavior and just make some responsible decisions that can lead you to have a positive experience with a lot less risk. So take less and just practice it responsibly.
Are there some cases where maybe, especially for young people, maybe there's some rules around maybe don't do it? Are there times where it's like maybe not a good idea, maybe here are some alternates that maybe you should explore before you go into the world of psychedelics?
Well, generally, it's just not advised to partake with any mind-altering substances before you're 18. Some even would argue the age of 21 because the brain hasn't been fully formed yet. So that, that's actually the first thing that everyone should be aware of. But still recognizing that, I was a teenager once. You were a teenager once before. There's a lot of things that we know, and still we used to choose to practice things because that's just the nature of that age. And so, yeah, just understanding that, then yeah, if you're going to do it, if you're still going to do it and avoid that part of advice, then at least again, do so safely, do so responsibly. Don't throw all rules out the window.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about microdosing. I don't know if you know much about microdosing, but microdosing has gained in popularity, especially in Silicon Valley amongst some of the tech community. That's who I've been connected with. And there's this idea that if you take a small enough dosage just below the threshold of being consciously aware of the psychedelics, that it sort of opens your mind up. Makes it easier to break through problems. If you're a coder, it makes it a little bit easier to solve tough technical problems. What's your take on microdosing? Its application and potential benefits?
Yeah, microdosing is a practice that is very commonly used right now, as you know yourself. A lot of people do like that practice because taking subperceptual doses for a lot of people can provide great benefits without the risk, the potential psychological risk that can be involved in taking higher doses. And also for a lot of people prefer to use microdosing in lieu of other pharmaceutical medications because typically they're more natural. They're not as, they don't have the same effects on that the pharmaceuticals can have on their brain in terms of toxicity and also the way that they make them feel, right? So pharmaceuticals, a lot of my clients report if they take antidepressants, one of the first things they say is, I don't know who I am. I feel removed from my soul. I feel numb emotionally. And it's interesting because maybe they see that that medication can help them manage their depression, but it also causes a different type of a side effect that makes them depressed in a different way, right? So they just feel numb and they don't feel connected to life, and they feel like they're kind of missing out on what life has to offer them. So a lot of people like to approach microdosing because it helps them manage these tips, sometimes the same conditions that they take antidepressants for. So for example, a lot of people that suffer from depression and anxiety, they approach psilocybin containing mushrooms and microdose on those, because they are, when you microdose on mushrooms, it is thought to have the same anti-anxiety effect as certain antidepressants do. And certainly, I mean, I've had clients and worked with people that decided to use mushrooms to manage their depression and anxiety, and they made incredible breakthroughs without pharmaceuticals. And also a lot of people use microdosing also to taper off of their medications if they're preparing for a bigger journey. So, you know, a lot of antidepressants and medications contraindicate certain types of psychedelics. So people want to approach this modality, but they can't partake with it because they're taking pharmaceuticals. But because the pharmaceuticals help them manage their mood, it would be irresponsible to completely, you know, they have to go through a long tapering process to get them to a place where they're able to be medication free. So a lot of people like to microdose during that period to help balance out that unstable tapering period that they may have with pharmaceuticals, and that's how they wean themselves off of pharmaceuticals. Yeah.
Do you feel like the people that are considering this, that are on medication, are they having open conversations with their doctor or psychiatrist about what they're thinking about trying? Do you think, well, one, are they kind of also working in concert with their doctor, or are we not yet at that point where people can feel comfortable doing that? And I'm saying this because you know, for any physicians or people that are professionals that might be listening, this is a growing field, and I think there are a lot more people exploring, experimenting with psychedelics, and it's going to eventually make its way into the doctor's office. So it's something probably good to be aware of. But what's your take on that?
It's about 50-50 right now. A lot of people do, you know, they have managing physicians and clinicians, and they feel like they can come to it with it. And typically their medical support team is aware and is supportive, but they don't necessarily have the tools to support them through that process. And then some of them, yeah, there are some people like that, and some people that prefer to not talk to their therapists about it. And some psychiatrists actually are not open to it, as far as I know. Like, some psychiatrists definitely still want to, they feel safer providing them with the solutions that they know and trust and what they were trained with.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they're people too, so they're just as capable of biases, or, you know. And I also think they have a responsibility to be cautious.
Yeah, they have a lot of liability there too, so that's understandable. But again, these days where there are a lot of programs that are speaking directly to clinicians and psychiatrists, and it's just a matter of how quick can we make ourselves known and come before these doctors, so they find us and they see that this information is available, and then it's just going to be up to the clinician, you know, how open-minded they are if they want to explore that modality and further to learn more and add into their professional toolkit. Absolutely.
I think I saw a couple of advertisements for ketamine treatments in the LA area. Are those
just a couple?
Are there more? I mean, I'm not very familiar with it, but I don't know the legal status of that. I imagine if they're advertising it, they must have a license to do that. I don't know if you have any experience with the ketamine, or anyone who's gone through those experiences. Is that sort of the direction that you see psychedelics going in the future, where there are these specialized clinics that are advertising, come get your MDMA treatment here?
So unfortunately, yes, that's kind of what I see. I'm saying unfortunately because, well, again, right now we're kind of like at the stage between two paradigms, right? An old paradigm is being destroyed, and a new paradigm is emerging. And the crack between the two is always an interesting place where we get to explore and test these concepts and these ideas and the hypotheses that we have, and see what works. currently with the way that the ketamine clinics are set up, they're helpful for a lot of people. And at the same time, actually the majority of the clients that I've had, most of them that have undergone ketamine therapy, come in with horror stories as to their experiences. Wow. Because they're even, you know, if these medical professionals have good intentions, with all due respect, an anesthesiologist that has a license to provide like ketamine in a clinic doesn't have any idea about setting, the transpersonal experience, integration, and they don't provide, not all of them, of course, there are many specialized clinics that do, but most of them, as far as I've heard, just don't have that knowledge or education to facilitate that psychedelic level of healing that that ketamine can provide. So they offer it more as kind of like a cut and dry physical, more like biological treatment for depression, as opposed to the transpersonal aspect, healing aspect of it.
It's very focused on just delivering the drug and having that. But I think what a lot of people what you're touching on is a lot of people that have a psychedelic healing experience hark on it's the overall experience that you have. Mm-hmm. It's not, the drug is the facilitator, it's the conduit that sort of facilitates the experience. And I wasn't aware of that, but that seems to be where you've carved out a nice niche for yourself, and where a lot of your work is headed right now, and sort of like trying to train these professionals to facilitate those healing experiences in a safe way for people that are seeking psychedelic treatments.
Absolutely. And I feel like, you know, it does have to be a marry between science and tradition, you know, and we haven't even, this whole conversation, we haven't really talked about the whole cultural aspect, the cultural appropriation, the elders, the communities that have been utilizing the power of psychedelic healing for millennia, for spiritual treatments, for mental health treatments, for physical ailments, right? And we definitely have a responsibility here in the West, which is a very, right, like again, medical model type of society. We need to merge between the two and marry the old wisdom, the ancient knowledge with the modern practices. That's the only way it's going to work. One cannot work without the other. And, you know, having, like you say, a clinic that just delivers a drug and, you know, expects the client to just be, well, that's not going to work. And it's also not going to work. There's a company, I forget their name, but they're trying to develop a drug that emulates the result. They're trying to like replicate the effects of psychedelic drugs, but without the effects, basically, so they don't go through a trip and they don't have any type of experience, but just to have the effects. And I'm sorry, that's just ludicrous. It is audacious, and I feel like it completely misses the point. But hey, you know, this field is open to a lot of interpretations. And just going back to your like old last question of what's the field going to look like in 4 or 5 years? A circus is what it's going to look like. But that's the magic of a psychedelic journey. You know, that's the magic of psychedelics, is that it's a complete psycho-spiritual circus. And, you know, different people will connect with different modalities and will get the healing that they need. And the least that we can do is at least set a solid foundation of, again, education, safety, information, community support, and normalize the use of these drugs, because people are using them. And that's half the work, right? That's how we heal to begin with. We just accept one another for all the different desires that we have. And that's how we begin to heal as a humanity. So it served its purpose. Either way, it's going to serve its purpose.
Absolutely. So as we close this out, what's your message to the people? And if folks are interested in learning more about your services, and in particular your coaching, how do they get a hold of you and how do they find you?
Thank you. So you can find me through my website, psychedelicschool.com, psychedelicintegrationcoach.com, and shirigodasi.com. And my message for the people is heal, serve, love.
Beautiful. Well, let's leave it there. Shiri, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to be looking forward to watching you and your services and the healing that you're providing grow over the coming years as psychedelics makes its way through the collective consciousness of folks here in the US.
Thank you so much, Josh. Take good care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.